71 people are dead across 3 Chinese provinces after a dam collapsed. A rare tornado struck 2 cities, and a landslide buried 33 forestry workers. All of it happened within roughly 24 hours. As of Wednesday, July 9th, 39 are confirmed dead in Guangxi from the dam failure, 11 are dead in Hubei from the tornado, and 21 are dead in Gansu from the landslide. One person is still missing in Hubei. The 3 disasters span more than 2,000 kilometers of Chinese territory, from the southern coast to the northwest interior. The dam collapse and the tornado are both directly linked to one weather system, the remnants of Typhoon Maysak. The landslide struck the same day, in a geologically unstable region of the northwest. President Xi Jinping addressed all 3 in a single directive, and the central government allocated emergency relief to all 3 provinces simultaneously. Typhoon Maysak was the 10th named storm of the 2026 Western Pacific typhoon season. It formed as a tropical depression on July 1st and was upgraded to a tropical storm by Japan's meteorological agency on July 2nd. Maysak made its first landfall on the evening of July 3rd near Lingshui on Hainan Island, with sustained winds of 83 km per hour. It was not a powerful storm by typhoon standards, but it carried an enormous volume of moisture. After crossing Hainan, Maysak moved through the Gulf of Tonkin and made a second landfall on July 4th near Mong Cai in Vietnam's Quang Ninh province. It weakened to a tropical depression as it drifted inland across southern Guangxi. That would normally be the end. But the remnant circulation held together and kept moving northeast, sustained by moisture from 3 separate sources: the South China Sea, the Beibu Gulf, and the Bay of Bengal. Ren Kuyu, a meteorological expert and professor at the China University of Geosciences in Yuan, told the Global Times that the broader impact of Typhoon Maysak had, quote, exceeded expectations, end quote. The moisture supply was unusually abundant, which explained why the storm's remnants retained their strength so far inland. When that warm, wet air mass collided with a cold vortex moving south from northeast China and the seasonal Mayu front, sometimes called the plum rain front, it created unstable atmospheric conditions across a wide band of the country. The first disaster hit in Guangxi. Between the morning of July 4th and the evening of July 6th, Maysak's remnant moisture dumped rain on southern Guangxi for nearly 60 straight hours. At Bafeng village in Binyang County, stations measured 713 millimeters of rain, about 28 inches, in a single 24-hour period between the mornings of July 5th and July 6th. That is more than half the region's average annual rainfall compressed into one day. That volume of water pushed the entire water management system past its limits. By July 6th, 341 reservoirs across Guangxi had exceeded their flood control levels, according to Xinhua. 56 monitoring stations on 41 rivers were reporting water levels above warning thresholds. The worst failure came at Liulan Reservoir in Hengzhou, a medium-sized dam built around 1960. At approximately 11 o'clock that morning, 2 sections of the 66-year-old dam gave way, opening a breach roughly 50 meters wide and releasing about 93 million cubic meters of water into the communities downstream. A second reservoir in Hengzhou, Yunbia Reservoir, also overtopped and breached the same day. A third, Liulan Reservoir in Binyang County, overtopped but held. Nanning city government raised its flood emergency response to level 1 at 11:30 local time, the highest tier in China's system. But for communities directly below the Liulan Dam, the water arrived before the response could reach them. A resident of Dangshu village, quoted by the Epoch Times, said the flooding hit so fast that people simply could not get out. As of July 9th, 39 people are confirmed dead, with 9 still missing. 26 of those deaths are attributed directly to the Liulan breach. 130,000 people have been evacuated across Guangxi, and 375,000 are directly affected across 63 county-level areas spanning all 14 cities in the province. Less than 10 hours after the dam collapsed, the second disaster struck. On the evening of July 6th, at roughly 8:10 local time, a large wedge tornado formed over eastern Hubei province, about 800 kilometers northeast of Nanning. It crossed the Yangtze River and tore through the cities of Huanggang and Ezhou. The tornado was rated EF2 on the enhanced Fujita scale, which classifies tornado intensity from EF0 to EF5 based on the damage produced. An EF2 means estimated wind speeds around 160 miles per hour, strong enough to tear roofs off well-built houses, snap large trees, and lift vehicles off the ground. At a logistics company in the tornado's path, trucks were thrown 30 meters into the air. In Huanggang, a 30-year-old man was sucked out of his 12th-floor apartment along with his sofa and cabinets. His cousin, identified by the surname Liu, found him unconscious on the ground-level green belt outside the building. Liu told local media, quote, "When I found him, he was already unconscious, with only faint breathing," end quote. The man, surnamed Zhong, is now in intensive care. A student at Huanggang Normal College, identified as Sally, told reporters she initially thought the tornado was an earthquake. The university campus sustained damage. Across Hubei province, 11 people were killed and 331 were injured. In Huanggang, 4 people died, 5,975 were affected, and 178 were hospitalized, 5 of them in critical condition. In Ezhou, 5 died and 155 households were damaged. The tornado destroyed 22 buildings outright and damaged 4,855 more. Economic losses have been estimated at 450 million yuan, about $63 million. Hubei is not one of China's tornado-prone regions. Professor Ren told the Global Times that China's most active tornado zones are the Yangtze River Delta, the Pearl River Delta, and parts of the northeast China Plain. The last recorded tornado in Hubei was on May 14, 2021, in Wuhan's Zhejiang district, more than 5 years earlier. Ren described the Huanggang tornado as, quote, extremely rare, end quote. Gao Qi, chief forecaster at the Hubei Meteorological Center, explained the mechanism. Maysak's remnants carried tropical moisture deep inland, while the cold vortex from the northeast brought cooler air into the region. The collision produced intense vertical wind shear, which is the difference in wind speed and direction between the surface and the upper atmosphere. Sinking dry, cold air met rapidly rising warm, humid air, generating rotating updrafts strong enough to spawn tornadoes. Thunderstorms with gale-force winds swept across 38 county-level regions in Hubei that night. The heaviest rainfall reached 151.8 millimeters in Maishi Township, and gusts hit force 13 on the Chinese wind scale in parts of Ezhou and Xianing. The third disaster came about 11 hours after the tornado. At 6:56 on the morning of July 7th, a hillside collapsed in the Baxianggu area near Ranzang Village, Nanhe Township, Tanchang County, in Gansu Province, more than 1,000 kilometers northwest of Hubei. The landslide struck 33 workers at the Minjiang Forestry General Farm, a state-run operation in the valley. They were residents of nearby villages, hired as temporary laborers to cut and trim trees for 130 yuan a day, about $18. One of the trapped was a man in his early 50s who had been hired that morning. Longnan officials classified the slide as a shallow soil landslide in an accumulation layer. It measured roughly 130 meters long, covered about 5,400 square meters, and displaced an estimated 10,000 cubic meters of material. The preliminary cause was attributed to steep terrain, erosion, and local geological conditions. Tanchang County sits near the eastern fringe of the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau, in a region of steep valleys and crisscrossing rivers that is prone to landslides. The area's geological conditions were partly destabilized by the 2008 Wenchuan earthquake, a magnitude 7.9 event centered roughly 300 kilometers away. 18 years later, the ground in parts of this region remains unstable. The Ministry of Natural Resources activated a Level 3 geological disaster defense response at 9 o'clock that morning and sent a working group to the site. 345 rescuers with 10 search dogs worked through the day and night. Initial reports on the morning of July 7th listed 5 dead and 12 missing. By 3:20 on the morning of July 8th, all 33 had been accounted for. 21 were dead. 7 were injured and reported in stable condition. 5 were pulled out unscathed. Longnan officials warned that the remaining landslide material was unstable and secondary slides remained possible. President Xi Jinping issued instructions on July 7 addressing all three disasters in a single directive, calling for, quote, all-out efforts in organizing flood emergency rescue, disaster relief, treatment of the injured, and resettlement of the affected people, end quote. He also called for inspections of rivers, lakes, aging reservoirs, and areas prone to geological hazards. The central government allocated a total of 410 million yuan, about $56.6 million, across the affected provinces. 260 million yuan went to Guangxi for flood and typhoon relief. 100 million yuan from the National Development and Reform Commission covered emergency infrastructure recovery in Guangxi, targeting roads, water systems, schools, and hospitals. A further 50 million was split between Hubei and Gansu. 20 million for relocation and reconstruction in Hubei, 30 million for search and rescue, evacuation, and geological hazard assessments in Gansu. As of Thursday, July 9, the death toll across the three provinces stands at 71. That number is the sum of three separate provincial counts. No single Chinese government source has published a combined figure. In Guangxi, Nanning's Vice Mayor Ding Wei confirmed that floodwaters are receding but warned that more rain is expected. 341 reservoirs remain above their flood control limits. Downstream, the Wuzhou Hydrological Station is forecasting flood peaks more than 6 meters above warning level. In Hubei, cleanup and repair operations are underway. In Gansu, the rescue is over, but the hillside that killed 21 workers remains unstable. China has roughly 98,000 reservoirs, many of them built in the 1950s through the 70s. The Liulan Dam was designed to handle a 1-in-100-year flood. The rainfall that broke it appears to have gone beyond that threshold. Xi Jinping's directive specifically called for inspections of aging reservoirs. 341 of them in Guangxi alone are still under the kind of pressure that, 3 days ago, split the Liulan Dam open. Subscribe to stay updated for the latest disaster reports.